tonight's. Welcome to this evening's regular meeting of the Ojai Planning Commission. Members of the public wishing to address the Planning Commission on items appearing on the agenda are requested to complete a speaker's card, file it with the secretary prior to the start of the meeting. Cards are available in the lobby. Speakers should state their name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Comments must be directed to the commission, not the audience. While Planning Commission is in session, all in attendance are expected to maintain order and decorum and to obey the orders of the chair. Roll call.
Lajowski, Merck.
Here.
Jagiello.
Here.
Zabilla.
Here.
Vice Chair Nolan.
Here.
Chair Foster.
Here.
Nicklin.
Yeah.
Lawrence, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public communications is the time we set aside during the Planning Commission meeting for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on items of city business other than scheduled agenda items. Matters raised at this time may be briefly discussed by the Commission and will generally be referred to staff and or placed on a subsequent agenda. Under state law, other than for emergency items, no action can be taken at this meeting. I do not have any cards before me unless there's someone from the audience who would like to speak on items other than the agenda items for this evening, which will be covered in the regular agenda. But if you have a matter you'd like to bring up, not addressing an agendized item, now's the time, and I see no one coming forward, so we'll move on to the consent items. The consent calendar is approved by a roll call vote on one motion. I don't know if I really need to repeat that, do I? Commission will discuss or disapprove an item. It must be removed from the consent calendar, considered as a separate item. The first item on the consent item are minutes of the special joint meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission and Planning Commission from December 11th, 2014. I'll need a motion.
Make a motion that we adopt the special joint meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission and the Planning Commission meeting of December 11th, 2014.
I'll second it.
Roll call.
Merck.
Abstain.
Jagiello.
Yes.
Zabilla.
Yes.
Chair Nolan. Vice Chair Nolan.
Yes.
Chair Foster.
Abstain.
Nicklin.
Yes.
The next agenda on the consent item are the minutes from our regular meeting of the Planning Commission, January 7th, 2015.
I'll move we approve those minutes.
I'll second.
Roll call.
Merck.
Yes.
Jagiello.
Yes.
Zabilla.
Yes.
Vice Chair Nolan.
Yes.
Chair Foster.
Yes.
Nicklin.
Yes.
Now's the time we're going to made our disclosure of site visits and ex parte contacts as they concern tonight's agendized items. Lawrence, would you like to begin?
Yeah, I visited the site actually twice, and there were no ex parte contacts.
I also have visited the site and before and after.
I visited the site and had no contacts.
I visited 310 Fox Street and have had no ex parte contact.
I visited the site and had no ex parte contact.
And I'm familiar with the site and have not had any ex parte contacts.
The Municipal Advisory Council Planning Commission Liaison Report. I believe there was not a meeting because it was
There was no meeting.
There was no meeting. It was a national holiday. So that would mean on our next meeting, Commissioner Jagiello will be attending. Okay. And following that, Commissioner Lajowski is on deck. So, okay, public hearing item number 3. Design Review Permit, DRP 14-15, to allow for modification of 4 existing windows and the window coverings at 310 Fox Street. The The recommendations are to adopt the PC resolution, the required findings for design review permit 1415, including the CEQA findings, accept the categorical exemption, and approve the DRP 14-15 subject to the conditions of approval, or continue the public hearing and refer the design review permit to the Historic Preservation Committee for review and comment. Could we hear from staff, please?
Yes, good evening. This is a little bit unusual for a the recommendation, I should say, is a little unusual for a DRP permit. Specifically, the issue in this particular case is the age of the building and the fact that the building is listed on the Historic Preservation, City of Ojai, I guess I should say, Historic Preservation Commission's list of sites of merit, meaning properties which are older and have some historic merit as it relates to the City of Ojai, and have been placed on the merits list, hoping at some point they'd become landmarked. And with that, I'll just give you a brief description of the project. The applicants had originally submitted back in the summer of 2014, this past summer, to do a director's exemption and a building permit to allow the installation of new windows. And the director's exemption was reviewed, and a letter was sent to the applicant telling them that they didn't really qualify for a director's exemption due to the fact that it's a historic building. We felt it was necessary that they continue with the design review permit and have this public hearing, which we're having tonight. And as such, as I said in my staff report, eventually the applicant did file in October 2014 for this design review permit. Staff did talk with him, and we told him to, because it was a design review permit, to make sure that he was including everything that he needed or was going to propose in the near future for the project. They're located at Fox Street. And so there was a few added items put on there besides the windows. And I think there was modification to 4 windows and then their covers. And I apologize if that's not a very accurate description. It's the kind of covering, awning type eyebrow decorative feature that's over the window. And the installation, I think, restucco the building with a new taupe color, install some different landscaping, specifically 3 new trees, and replace 1 exterior door. And so staff would like to note for the commission that these are relatively minor modifications, but do require the Planning Commission to review them as they relate to the design review criteria. And like I said before, we just want you to know that this building was built or recognized in the Historic Sites of Merit as being built in the 1920s and was originally as the ice plant. And so with that, I guess I'm open to any questions you may have about this, but I would just like to elaborate that this situation with the 2-pronged option for the commission is, since it is an older building, if you felt it was necessary or in helped the process in hearing what the HPC has to say about a historic building, then staff has given you that option. I should point out that there was a letter from Craig Walker, who's on the Planning Commission, and it's on the dais today, and you should have gotten a copy of it, and it talks about this is listed as a Category 1 property on the Historic Resources Survey, and it does have potential to be landmarked for the city. And I know the applicant's in the audience, and we've talked about this when he's come in, and you can ask him tonight. I don't think he has a desire to landmark his property, but and so we had this information from one of the commissioners from the Historic Preservation Committee, and the suggestion to send it down to the HBC committee and then hear it back again with their recommendations is more or less staff's recognizing that it's a courtesy to send something that they feel they have a valid opinion on back to them. Most of the work's already been done by the applicant at this point. We don't think it really delays him. The windows have all been changed out, as you can see in the photos that are in your packet. So with that, I'm open to any questions you may have about why the process that we're suggesting.
Kathleen, would you mind sharing with us the process that the Historic Preservation Commission takes to deem up a site, either a merit or landmark, and then what's the procedure for, how do they notify the property owner, and then do they go into agreement with the property owner?
Excuse me.
Thank you.
Okay, so the Historic Preservation Commission established this historic sites of merit or historic resources survey. I think that same survey has been floating around, is that not correct, Sherry, for quite a number of years, that same survey. They have a PowerPoint that they do, and they invite once or twice a year, they do outreach to those people that are on that historic sites list. They send out invitations, and they do a PowerPoint, and they talk about the benefits of being landmarked and the Mills Act. So it's a very soft outreach to those people that they want to see. While the ordinance does provide for you to landmark something in opposition of a homeowner or property owner, excuse me, I don't know that the city has ever done that, except for maybe possibly the Neff Lounge, which was part of the environmental document. We were never able to find anything that the property owner had ever signed. So generally speaking, they have not taken that position to landmark something, even though it's allowed, landmark something without the property owner's permission, even though it's allowed by code. So the Historic Preservation Commission does not have a pot of money that they utilize to do historic reports. So when something is landmarked and an owner comes in, the commissioners assign somebody who has some kind of knowledge, usually another commissioner has knowledge of that piece of property, and they work on what would be like a preliminary historic report. So, and then it goes through the process. Of late, I would say, staff has been requiring the historic reports to come from a qualified historian. And so, without a budget to do those, the Historic Commissions kind of has their hands tied in actually pursuing landmarking without a homeowner's involvement, because they would be obviously the money behind, even though there's actually no fee taken in to landmark. The city council has waived that because they want to remove barriers to landmarking. There is some cost to it in doing these reports and establishing a good criteria of why it was landmarked, what that means for the future, and how work permits would be processed. So in this case, the property is older, and it is eligible to be landmarked, and we have no information other than it was built in 1920, and it was the ice house. So it has a historic history because of its use. Obviously, in the owner's here, and he can tell you that if you've gone out to the site, you can see that there have been renovations, and we don't really know, because again, you'd have to have someone who's qualified out there talk about the period and like the plastic roofing that's on the top, when that was used and period of time that came from, and whether these things that he's asking to change have any bearing on why it would be considered historic. That would be beyond the scope here for staff. As I said, and we've gone over this a couple of times now because of the Neff Lounge, what he's doing is relatively minor. Staff feels it qualifies for a CAD exempt, and we wouldn't have presented it. We don't have any evidence in the record to date that demonstrates that replacing those windows or restuccoing it has anything to do with why it was eligible to be granted this put on the resource list. So at this point, I guess that's kind of in a nutshell where we find ourselves, and whether you feel that this is substantial enough, you want to, as a courtesy, send it to the HPC and ask for a referral on whether they think those windows and what they think of the items that he's asking to modify.
One other just follow-up question to that. So what triggers a project going directly to historic preservation prior to planning commission? In this case, it didn't, obviously.
So the code requires that they have jurisdiction over a work permit of a landscaped plan. A landmark property.
Okay.
This isn't landmarked.
Right.
So you really have jurisdiction, and it's a courtesy you would send to them and then ask them to give you their recommendations.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions from the planning commission?
I do. I'm confused about what got changed when in the timeline here, in terms of the work was started, and then it was brought to the attention of staff, and then did things just keep getting changed?
Yeah, I think you have it in your packet. Let me make sure that you have.
I keep reading it, and I'm not really just...
Okay, so if you look at attachment D, page 1 of 1, you'll see a photograph in there, and you can see where there's one window to the right of that photograph that's being altered.
Okay.
That's when we first had contact with the applicant, is one window. So all the other remaining windows were still the way they were, with the green sort of tail ends, wood, I forget what those are called, but yeah, something like that, yeah. And then the picture, if you turn the picture for page on attachment E, 1 of 1, shows what they look like now. So sometime between August and January, so that's like 4 months, they went from this to that.
And so they already knew that they were
yes,
coming on
we
the
had
agenda
talked
for
with them.
design review.
I'm sorry, what?
So they knew that this was a design review issue for planning commission?
Well, they were originally, they had originally applied for a director's exemption,
Right.
which would be like over the counter. But we all know the controversy with director's exemptions and things being out of the public eye, et cetera, et cetera. And I had written them a letter back in August or September, I don't remember when, telling them they didn't qualify for a director's exemption because these items they were doing they were doing to an older building, and I thought that there should be a public hearing and the public know what they're doing. We genuinely allow somebody to replace windows administratively. That will come to me, but usually that's kind of pulling a window out and putting it back in the same as it were. And you can see that even even the types, I don't know, he'd have to speak to it, but the whole decorative type of treatment to these isn't altered. And so because it's a historic building, that's why we thought it should come. So eventually we sent him an incomplete letter. He completed the project. We took him forward. We're trying to do this without as much, with as little cost as we can. When someone's doing this, obviously going design review costs more than doing a director's exemption. And that is a frustration for property owners, and so that was one of the issues too. And so we try to do this as quickly and expediently as we can, and without a lot of cost. And so, that those kind of issues, because obviously some property owners feel like, well, they have an issue. Maybe the windows leak. You can ask him. I don't know what the issue was, or he just decided he wanted to change them, and then you get into this, administrative kind of, process where he's having to come up before planning commission. And sometimes that's difficult to understand given the fact that other buildings can just change them out. And so, it's unfortunate that the building is on the list and that it is older and it had a purpose here in Ojai, because that does kind of heighten the review for it, unfortunately. So all buildings are not created equal here in Ojai. But yes, you can see, that's why I put the pictures in here so you'd know what went on. And the other issue I just think is that letting it go to HPC, and it just demonstrates that he's pretty much performed the work, so you're not really delaying him at this point if you were to send it over for their referral. To say their comments, how's that?
Well, what could they, it's done.
Yes, it's done. They could either say, I don't know what they could say, because I really don't know. I have no reference other than the picture I put a picture in here in the very back of what it looked like when the original, it's a poor picture, but the original sites, when it was put on the sites of merit, and you can see it had those old original decorative covers over the windows. It's a really poor picture, but this is from the Historic Preservation's PowerPoint they have, where they, their PowerPoint And this is from their list, this pulled out where it says ice plant, 310 South Fox Street. And they started his business in the theater building in 1911, and George Harris bought the business and built the ice plant in 1920. So I'm assuming that over time, I mean, it's not an ice plant anymore, which is kind of an industrial use, and now, as I said in here, it's got kind of a personal service and some residence in it, so I'm assuming there's all kinds of modifications that have been done to the building.
Even in this picture, it's showing the plastic mansard roof tile on it.
Yeah.
So this is a later picture.
Yeah, so I think maybe that, to answer your question, what could they do? I don't know at this point what their recommendation would be, because I really don't know if they have additional information that's not in the administrative record here. But I guess we would have to refer to them to see what they would say.
Well, why, I mean, why are they here now if it's a done deal? Do they just have to come? I mean,
Yes, they have to make
come.
themselves legal, or they have two choices. They can take everything off and put it back the way it was, or they can get a permit making it legal. We just don't
Okay.
let people stay,
Right.
you know, and he's, I mean, he's obviously come forward and he wants to do that. You know, he doesn't want a cloud on his property, so.
I just have a question. If you have a building and it's proposed for an historical building, and you're the owner, can you accept it? Do you have to accept that?
No, you do not. But they can still landmark it. There's a procedure in there. I forget how it goes, but there's a procedure where it talks about how they can do that without your permission. They literally can. Putting it on the sites of merit, you know, I mean, it obviously isn't stating anything other than the obvious. It's a very old building. The threshold for, you know, a significant resource in the state of California is 50 years. So obviously it's beyond that, because it's getting pretty close to 100 at 1920. So kind of like the theater building, you know, that kind of age, I guess. So, but I don't think anything that he's doing at this point, the threshold, like I said before in CEQA, is a significant adverse impact to a historic resource. Replacing the windows and modernizing them, I don't think is a significant impact. So, you know, I'm trying to just be straightforward about it. I don't think he's done anything that, you know, he's changed the look, that's for sure. But those window coverings, I guess they blend with the roof on top, even though I think the roof is plastic, right? Yes, so that's all really I can tell you at this point.
Do we want to hear from the applicant, you think, first, before we comment on the design?
Would you, applicant, like to come forward? It's your option. Yeah.
Oh, no, I have no questions.
Okay.
Actually, it's not plastic right there, it's just tile, and we just put tile, just because the other wooden ones didn't match that style of the building.
Oh, you're talking about the new
ones on that
windows.
Fox Street, yeah.
Yeah.
The tile is on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another story maybe for next year, because we want to change all that,
Okay.
but maybe next year. But now it's just replacing the old windows
Okay.
and the door.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
It's
That's
just maintenance.
Yeah. Well, okay.
I had a quick question. So on this drawing that was submitted, it says replace plastic tile roof with real tiles. So that's a future project?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Mhm. What's interesting about that drawing there, that's part of the existing ice house,
Mhm.
correct? So, and so at one time it was modified substantially. I mean, if they went with
Right.
plastic tiles, obviously they didn't have those in 1920, so.
Mm. Right.
So it gives us a little perspective, yeah.
Can you ask her to come back up? Did you say your name and who you are for the record?
Oh, sorry.
I'm
Tessa
sorry.
Turner, owner of
Thank you.
the building.
Okay, well, if there's no further questions, I think we can move on to public comment. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak on the issue? I see none, so then just close the public comment. We're opened up for discussion.
Well, I think it's an improvement myself, going past there. I can see the old design with those, with the wood being exposed to the weather on a flat side. You know that well too, Stephen, how a flat-sided building is most, and especially in the direction when the prevailing winds come in that direction, it's got to be the worst kind of design for weatherproofing that you can do. Putting that eave over, and if you look underneath, the wood structure is almost similar to what's there, and then they just put some tile over it to waterproof it, to give it an eyebrow. So it's a practical, functional, and driving by it with the tile band, it looks like it's always been there. So I have no problem with it at
Okay.
all.
Anybody else?
I think it's a little troubling that, it's presented after the fact, I think it was, come to design review and then it just got done. I think that's a little troubling, but I agree that, it's, I can see why they went there, and I can see that it's expedient to just replace some stuff, and it looks reasonable. And then I think the only other question is really, to what courtesy do we owe, what degree of courtesy do we owe HPC on this matter? And I'm not sure, because it seems like the building has been compromised in so many ways, but I'm not the historic preservation person, so I'm not knowledgeable in that respect, so I'm a little bit torn.
With it going to historical preservation, is it going to incur more costs to the applicant?
No, I think we'd just take it as a courtesy. I mean, honestly, whatever the HPC has to say about this would just be, a courtesy to you. You could still take the same action. Since I've been here, there has been a lot of talk about moving these properties off, the historic sites of merit, or making an ordinance that has some teeth to it once you're on the historic sites of merit. But at this point, there isn't anything. So there's no rules and regulations on it. It's just really comes down to, one, is it doing anything that significantly damages the historic nature of the building? And the information we have today has to do with the use of the building. And obviously, everybody can look and see that the building's been significantly altered. And so I think we're fine taking action on that. And, as far as a courtesy, there really needs to be more rules and regulations and things that can be implemented to request this individual or anybody who's on the historic sites of merit. In other words, I guess what I'm saying in long ways around it is, when it comes back to you, you still have to use the same design review criteria to review it. And you're still going to say, this looks consistent with what the building looks like. Mm-hmm. And so, you really don't have authority to tell them, oh, by the way, go put the roof back the way it was, say it was different, or do this or do that. Because the windows, as it was pointed out, the windows are more consistent with the style now than they were before. So
where I'm leading this is what Rosalie said was his being respectful to the historical preservation. And in this communication, he says further research will be needed to see what roles these windows play. But I'm also saying that it'd be nice for the applicant just to get this thing done and finished tonight.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking the respectful side to the historical.
Well, I think, too, it's important to note, and you might want to call the applicant back up, but my understanding was the original windows that they took out, the ones that are there with the green wood, were plexiglass. They weren't glass windows. That's what they represented to me. Is that not correct?
I agree. It's a major improvement. Exactly what Chester,
So I don't think, again, with the plastic tile roof, plastic windows would be original. I don't know, but I'm thinking not. So I think then it comes down to just that covering, and as you guys all pointed out, the covering is more in keeping. So you have to kind of go by the design guidelines that are, the zoning regulations that you're bound by.
Okay. Additional comment?
I'm ready to make a motion. Well, whatever, whoever.
Let's hear it.
I make a motion to adopt PC Resolution DRP 1415, including CEQA findings. With the category exemption and approval of DR 15 subject to the conditions of approval as noted here.
I will second.
Roll call.
Motion.
Discussion. Mark?
Yes.
Jagiela?
Yes.
Isabella?
Yes.
Nolan?
Yes.
Foster?
Yes.
Nicklin?
Yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Turner. It's.
Thank you.
Okay. We're at the point where we're, hear our director on director's report and director actions.
So we just have 2 sign permits that have been approved. And that's it. And I'll move on to the code enforcement, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about code enforcement. And I will tell you that we've been conducting interviews last week and this week for our code compliance inspector. Moving forward with hiring city council funded a 30-hour-a-week code and compliance inspector, and so we've been doing that. So we're moving ahead and getting that together. And finally, let's talk about our meetings, because I need to make a correction. February 4th, we're having the telecommunications that you all heard last night. And so it will be probably kind of a busy night. And since the Wild Tennis Academy is a continued item, I will put that first, because that's normally the protocol. And then there's the second story edition at, I guess, did you say that Ayers? Okay. And then I guess, so I'll probably put telecommunications last, and unfortunately, because I think these other 2 are probably going to come and leave, But I don't know, unless you think that's too much, and I guess I can hold the DRP 1416 over to the next meeting. I don't know. I mean, we didn't have very many people last night at the telecommunications special meeting. I don't know how it will go. So it's up to you if you want to, I'm open to suggestions if you want to push that one back over to the February 18th. It could be a completely different night. On the 4th, it could be everybody comes out. We've.
There's no telling, but I think we could handle 3
okay,
items.
we'll just leave it then, and I'm going to do them in that. I'm going to do them 1, 2 with telecommunications 3, and noticing for that meeting went out this morning, so everything has been noticed. Those 3 items, and so you went from 2 really lean agendas to now you're going to have a big one. So there you go.
It all bounces out.
Yeah, and I guess that's all. Unless I have any questions about anything else coming up. We are working on a lot of items, and some really important ones. We have this the skilled nursing facility for the hospital, the second phase of the winery we're working on, and there's another one, I can't remember.
Inadvertently left off that I got pointed out to me today was the twice sold tails. Got inadvertently left off.
Oh, okay, and that's going, what, the 4th or the 18th?
It's supposed to go the 4th, but we didn't notice it today, so I don't know. We have to discuss it.
Okay. So we do have quite a number of things going, and a lot of things. And in fact, this week I have last night, tonight, and then tomorrow night for HBC. So we're working on a lot of agendas, and that might be why you had your last 2 were a little bit light. So I'm open to anything else that you may have questions on that, and I think that's it.
Okay.
Would you like an update on the NUF Lounge?
Oh, that sounds interesting. Yeah.
So just to let you know.
Absolutely.
Would you? All right. So let's see. I was sick in the middle of this, so let me think if I can figure out what day we're talking about. So they closed Monday, which I think was the 5th, And we had a historian. They had a historian out there during the demolition of that wall. In fact, they had the walls specifically marked off where they could and could not. Same with the doors. When they were the windows were eventually opened up and doors put in, they were able to do that without disturbing any of the plaster on the walls. But when they took the windows out, they were framed with plywood, so they weren't original. They had newer non-dimensional lumber in there, and had been originally framed. When you pull that off and you had the dimensional back there, where they were framed for doors, So they were able to document that. So that's one thing. With the wall right now has been, a temporary wall has been put in place in the Neff Lounge on that where it was removed, and that header, that iron I-beam went up, so they could continue to get a temporary of occupancy into the Neff Lounge while they continue to do the renovations to the restaurant. So the lobby was completed. That was, they were shut down for 10 days from Monday to Thursday, and that needed to be completed before they opened back up, and they did get that done. They got the removal of the pool out, and it rained, as everyone knows. It rained a lot, so that kept them from working on the pool because the ground was too wet. So there is no pool anymore, but a large pile of wet dirt, and I don't know at what point they are now working. So they're open for guests again, and the work from the restaurant and the pool and the landscaping will continue while they have guests there. And the Neff Lounge, so at some point that would be open and people could, if you wanted to see what it looked like with that. Right now, like I said, it has a temporary wall plastered in, so it actually has all that openings has a wall in front of it. So, but there was a historian on site during all Neff activities, and to make sure that there wasn't a slippery slope and more things didn't go away or they didn't have issues. And, there were some things that the beams that went across didn't go all the way across as they thought they were going to go. And there were just always some things like that, But generally speaking, it all went as it was approved. And because there was it was so minor what they did in the Neff Lounge, that and the lobby, that they were, I guess I should back up. Some of the things that they were going to do to the lobby, like move that door and things like that, they were not able to make that happen in the time frame. So they're just not going to do those until they come back for phase 2, which they'll be back this year for phase 2 and some other improvements back. But nothing to the Neff Lounge, I understand. So it would just be to the inn itself. They'll continue to make improvements to it. And so from that perspective, and then they will be working on their interpretive plan that they were conditioned that they had to have about the Neff Lounge, and that should be...
Can you explain that, the interpretive plan? What do you mean by that?
Well, the historic report, excuse me, for the Neff Lounge had a recommendation in it, excuse me, that they do an interpretive plan so that people, when they come into the Neff Lounge, know what the Neff Lounge is. And so it would be sort of pictures or stories or whatever showing its historic use over the years. And so that people understand, to broaden the base of the people who really understand the importance of the Neff Lounge to both the inn and Ojai.
Great.
So that's kind of that. And I think that's it. And then tomorrow night, I'll just tell you, I'm sorry, I'm off mic. Tomorrow night, I'm just going to tell you that the Carrie Miller, the general contractor for the theater, is presenting an update for the HPC. They're very interested in what's going on in the theater. And so he's graciously volunteered to come in and do a little update on that and what they, at this point, kind of getting the handle on the structural things, where they see it going from this point. So he's going to do that. And 5. So that's another kind of, keeping. I'm sure people are very interested. It's been a long time coming, in the remodel and the fixing the damage to the theater. So he's going to do that. So we're trying to keep up on all this activities with the. No, that again is not a landmark piece of property, but what he told me this afternoon was that they're interested in changing the type of stucco on the theater to a similar texture to what is on the tower at the post office, and the same color, because evidently the texture that was on the building previously was more a texture that you see like from the 60s. And so that's one of the things that he's going to bring up.
More authenticity.
Yes.
as it relates.
So he's going to present that. I told him, first time I heard about it was today, and we just talked about him bringing that up and then getting input. So that's all kind of I have to
Well,
report.
thank you.
All
That's
right.
all good information. I don't think there have been any subcommittee meetings since we last got together, Kathy. Is there?
No, but I'm wondering if I could bring something up from the tree committee, which is kind of related to complete streets. Is that possible?
Sure.
Do that? Okay, good. Well, we actually met this morning, and something that we've been attempting to work on for quite a few years since we adopted the Community Forest Management Plan, which was produced by the tree committee and planning staff. We have an Appendix A. Let me find it for 1 second here. Here we go. Anyway, Appendix A is the City of Ojai tree planting and maintenance standards. And it's very, bullet points and kind of generalized. And the one thing the tree committee had intended to do all along was to add to that and include details of like how to do some of these things, so that when a project gets permitted and it's required to plant trees, and or if the city is planting public trees, they could follow those standards or details. And so what we are proposing is that the city adopt the ANSI planting standards from 2012, and these are supported by the International Society of Arboriculture, and be adopted in whole, with the caveat that the tree committee could work with exceptions and modifications as needed. And let me just see what else I've got here. Anyway, so we would like to produce, like, say, a one-page detailed document that could be handed out and be part of the permitting process. In addition, we are requesting that the building inspector, before a project gets signed off, we would produce a checklist to give them to look at how the trees are planted. Because if we value our community forests, which I hope we do, and we further ask the city to support, if they're not planted correctly from the start, they become a problem in the long run. So it's important to get it done correctly from the beginning. And also, I wanted to say, too, that these planning details are available in CAD format, and we're hoping that maybe that's something we could actually have on the city website. We'd have to talk to you more about that. Let me see if there's anything else. All right, I mentioned the checklist. Oh, and one other thing that we did talk about was when the new inspector is hired, the tree committee has offered, or we are offering, that we could provide a training to the inspector about what we're looking at and how these details work, and to go over the checklist. Yeah, so anyway, my next question would be, what are the next steps to get something like this to be moved forward?
Well, I'm not really sure off the top of my head. Do you want to set an appointment and come in and we'll talk about it?
Okay.
That would be great.
Do that.
Okay.
Right. It's related to complete streets, and I brought it up, and I know there's some overlap here, but because we do deal with this tree planting and what have you.
I just, my recommendation too is that when we have these work products that the commission wants to move forward as a commission, that you guys sort of, kind of get consensus as a group.
Right.
Because the first question they're going to ask me is that one commissioner asking, or is it all of you asking?
Right. So I guess I should look at my fellow planning commissioners and, put it out that this is something representing the tree committee.
I think that
we could
one
do
of the
that.
things that we're remiss in having is we probably need to have like a section in the, oh, you have it in here, future agenda items. Did I bypass? Oh, so when we when I go through the future
Okay.
agenda items, then what you should do is and we can move back to that.
Get added.
And then you should say, I would like to, and then get consensus
Okay.
that you can add that on.
Okay.
Either one that for me to agendize it, for you guys to talk about it.
Okay. We could do a presentation.
Right, and then decide how you want to
Okay.
go, how you want it going forward to, you know, ask council or present it when
Okay.
you have a joint meeting as something you'd like to work on,
Okay.
or however you want it. But again, it has to get agendized.
Exactly.
And-
I just
and-
wasn't sure of the exact
So
process,
let's
so.
just put it on, if everybody,
Okay.
if you can get some kind of consensus that to place it on the future agenda for discussion, then I'm happy with that.
All right, I'll look to my fellow commissioners then.
I think it's a great idea, yeah. I'm ready for the discussion. Make it a discussion item, is that what it would be, or?
I guess we could do it as a discussion item, and then if needed, Kathleen and I could still meet with you, and/or
Okay.
Mike and Aub and I could meet with you, and then we could possibly get it on the agenda. I'm not sure what you think is a better way to move forward with it.
Let's just do a discussion item, that's
Okay.
fine. And then we can meet and, you know, you
Okay.
give me your information that you have, and
Okay.
I'll put something together and we'll get it on there,
Perfect,
okay?
thank you.
All righty. Well, I think it's the time where we get to listen to our city council liaison, council member Randy Haney. Welcome.
Good evening. You know, when I was with Rec and Parks, ours was very interactive. So I'm sitting here going, God, I'd like to really respond to what Kathy's talking about. But you guys have agendized it, and I'll just wait and listen about your tree issue or tree concerns. I just want to thank you guys for last night. There was a lot of information given, and it seemed like a long time, but it was actually a short amount of time. And, you know, the first attorney, the young guy, you know, he's only 28 years old. I was so impressed with that young man. I mean, you know how I'm talking now, I'm hesitating. There was no hesitation in him. There were no ums, there were no uhs. There was complete, well-thought-out sentences and concise and to the point. I was so impressed. See? And at the end of it, one of the comments about us or you having more meetings or more opportunity for the public to respond, I believe that every commissioner on all the commissions take their responsibilities, what's the word I'm looking for, to heart. You're not up here, you're not over there just to be here. You're here for a reason, and that's to make the city better. So I appreciate that, and I know the public appreciates that. And it's a lot of work, and I appreciate all those hours too. So I don't have any more to offer. I think Kathleen did a wonderful job on giving the updates, and I think having Terry Miller come in tomorrow, I might even drop in just to see that, just to see what's going on with the theater. So thank you so much.
Well, if there are no further discussion,
Chair Foster, can I just say one?
Please.
Just piggybacking on what Councilmember Haney mentioned, Kathleen, Nolan, and I approached Trip May yesterday after the workshop because obviously in an effort to really take our responsibility seriously, you know, we asked him really what was the best use of our efforts. We're obviously going to pore over that draft ordinance very carefully, but what's really the best use of our time and our brain power, since we aren't attorneys, where can we make the most impact? And he really encouraged us to look at section 050, and I think it's page 4 or 5 of 19, and that he really felt like we could just kind of brain dump into that place. We obviously, again, don't want to craft something that's specific or a carve-out that doesn't apply to everything else, but he did feel like that was really a place to really concentrate our efforts.
do you know in general what that?
It has to do with the community
References?
values and the local values
Okay.
and all of that.
Mhm. Great.
So-
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a general question there. Well, how do we, in terms of grasping what these design guidelines look like, and how do we approach that with the public in fairness, not only to the public but to ourselves, so we do have the correct information in front of us. And that's something I'm sure that will be on the discussion table at our February 4th meeting. So,
Yeah.
anything else, commissioners? This meeting's adjourned.